So good morning, everyone, and welcome to another session of LAPADA Leaders. I am just going to, before I introduce our guests today, I'll wait a few moments just to let everyone gather in from the waiting room. And today we will be talking about why Britain is best. Really in terms of craftsmanship, artisans and the skills and the homegrown talent, both from today and from a little our sort of recent and past, really. So we have a full complement, so we should be able to cover most areas. We've got Henriette von Stockhausen, who is co-founder of VSP Interiors. And Henriette was both at the City of Guild of London Art Studies, Sotheby's Institute and Inchbald. So she covers a whole spectrum in terms of both academic and design in practice, and also uses antiques a lot in her interiors. So we'll hear a little bit more about that as we go on. We also have Charlotte Packer with us, who is editor of Homes and Antiques. So many of you may have come across her in that way. I have as well. She's been a journalist covering this area for a long time. So also has written for The Independent, The Telegraph, The Sunday Times, as well as The Guardian and Tableau, which is a lovely magazine. I wish I actually spoke Dutch, but it's beautifully produced with all of the pictures. And also has just done an MA in creative writing as well. So I don't know if there's something else we should be reading soon.
Not for a while.
And then we also have Tom Palmer, who's from Plowden and Smith, and he trained at the prestigious Westdean College near Chichester, which is such a joy to visit. And if any of you ever have time to do a course and you don't want to do a full degree or postgrad degree there, they do wonderful kind of summer schools and stuff where you can actually stay in the college. It's an amazing place. And it's one of the only places where you can still learn your craft, Tom, I believe. I mean, in certainly this country, it's an amazing place. And Tom has worked on some really interesting projects here in the UK and further afield. For the V&A, he's worked on Gwyn and Gibbons carvings in St Paul's that we'll hear a bit more about. The Gilbert Scott designed King's College Chapel on the Strand, and has won some awards as well. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. When we start to kind of look at, I mean, it feels a bit sort of in the middle of all of these conversations about vaccines and everything, sort of, yeah, we're in the middle of a row, really, aren't we? But here we are, and we're able to talk about British craftsmanship, and it's perfectly timed in terms of sort of one of the pinnacles, I think, that shows that sort of artisan and skill embodied across different things. Is it was William Morris's birthday yesterday, so I think, you know, timing is perfect for that. Also, I think it comes on the sort of the crest of this wave, which is, I think, really important actually and worth looking at, is the government have created a big paper on the soft power of Britain being the superpower. And I think that where that soft power is very strong for us is actually in design, craftsmanship, and the art market. So it's something that we're all part of. So it's very good timing. And so with that, I wanted to start with that sort of, I suppose, slightly thorny, murky issue. And I'm going to start with you, Henriette, on how Brexit and COVID might have impacted your design projects, for good or bad, and whether that's sort of pushing you towards looking at more British companies as a result.
It's interesting. I think we already work with a lot of British companies and British artisans anyway, because of that kind of niche market that we, you know, the sort of country house interiors sort of market that we mainly deal with. But in terms of Brexit and I guess COVID, some interesting things I think that I've noticed. So firstly, we do have problems with fabrics that come from Europe, Italy, France. Everything is, you can't really be sure lead times anymore. Everything is kind of delayed. Nobody can give you a real idea of when things will clear up or be moved on, or lots of our items that we had ordered before this get held up in customs. They don't know when that will be sorted out. So there is quite a lot of uncertainty, I think, in that respect. Which obviously helps when you then so that you look at more local fabrics, of which we have plenty. I mean, so many incredible new fabric houses and or wallpaper producers, smaller kind of companies, really super creative, bringing out new exciting things, new designs. You can really feel a proper vibe, a proper buzz, I think, going on in our design community, which is exciting, and kind of the kind of other side of the coin of COVID. I think people sort of look more inwards, and also probably creativity has been hugely pushed by sort of having the time and being at home and having the ability to maybe create a bit more and also think about our homes more. So those I think are the major things that I have noticed in the past year or so.
And actually, just taking that a little bit further, that idea of this sort of incubator, if you like, for British talent. Charlotte, are you seeing that as well coming through editorially in terms of wallpapers and fabrics?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, not a day goes by without us receiving a flurry of press releases and samples that relate to, really beautiful and exciting new wallpapers made in small batches by small designers. It feels like it's actually quite an exciting time. And although I think things have been really hard for a lot of businesses, that orders have been cancelled, sales are limited, some people have talked to us about the fact that pause has allowed for a different kind of creativity to without deadlines, without the pressure of supplying particular people at particular times. Designers have been able to perhaps sidestep. And I've noticed there's a ceramics artist, Polly Fern, who is an illustrator, and suddenly she's really been exploring wallpapers. And I don't know, I haven't asked her whether that is as a result of all of this, but it has actually come out of her works have appeared during this kind of COVID year. And yes, I mean, it feels like there's a lot of really exciting things happening, which is great, really. And I think there's an appetite for it with our readers, who certainly have been saying to us, when we've begun to focus on these things, thank God, colour, pattern, joyful things. That's what they want to see. We've been stuck at home, feeling frustrated and bored and anxious too. Our homes are both a prison and a haven, but it is that one little area that we can exert a little bit of control over. And so it doesn't surprise me to hear from Henriette that there is a lot of activity there, people being interested in wanting to do things to their homes. So it's potentially a really exciting moment, I think.
I think that's really, it's interesting. We've talked quite a lot about that sort of being around your four walls and looking at needing to zone, and you might do that with a desk or a tapestry or something like that. But actually, what we haven't really explored is that element of out of control outside, and that sort of need to control inside, although still out of control. So Henry, I'm with you. I've been waiting for some fabric for my sofa for quite a long time, still on order. Before we move on to the next question, what I hadn't mentioned this time is, of course, there will be time for questions and answers for anyone who's joining us. And if you just pop those into the Q&A box, and you'll see, I think Gillian, my colleague in marketing, has already put up our speakers' websites, and will continue to put in material in the chat function for references and things as we go along. But just sort of, I'm wondering as well on that, and just thinking about this kind of new surge in creative talent. For you, Tom, do you see particular skill sets that we are good at? Because obviously you have, within your workshops, you've got a whole workshop of people coming, and I know that you did have quite a few people coming from maybe across Europe to learn the trade with you. Is that something that will continue? And is that because Western College is here and Plowden Smith is here, or is it just particular skill sets that Britain has that can teach other people from your workshops?
Yeah, I think we've always encouraged interns from abroad to come and spend time in our workshops, and I think hopefully that will still continue. It hasn't really been possible this year, or obviously part of last year, potentially due to COVID. I don't think Brexit will stop that happening, and it's something we encourage really as well. I think, yes, definitely the UK is still seen as leaders in lots of different craft areas, and we can certainly assist with the experience that we can give to interns and students from other countries, mainly Europe, but yeah. So it's
and sort of continuing at this idea of people being kind of locked in their homes, and obviously they're looking at design projects and everything, but have you seen as well, I mean, presumably many of the dealers who normally put things into your workshops are able to give you a lot more time now, because they're not rushing to have something maybe for the next masterpiece, which sadly has been postponed again. But have you actually seen people, private members of the public, come to you because they?
Yeah, no, very much so. I think as people are spending more time in their homes, just even the general wear and tear on their furniture is more. So, the chairs are. The joints in the chairs are becoming looser quicker, I think, and also people working from home, and the desk that they've had in their office that probably barely got used before, they're now actually sitting at and using, and realizing the drawers don't work properly, or the handles come off the third drawer, and it's just something they've never perhaps had time, or it hasn't annoyed them sufficiently to have anything done. But now obviously they're using it more, and deciding it's a good time to get it repaired. So yeah, we have had things that are definitely come from people spending more time at home, and as we say, people are looking at stuff more because they're in their homes more. So all those little jobs that they've been putting off perhaps, or haven't irritated them sufficiently, are now that they want done. So yeah, we've had
as well. I wonder whether, and it's something that we see at LAPADA, and generally, particularly in the art and antiques area, is everything has a story, and it's come from somewhere and it's going somewhere. Perhaps there's also a sentimentality or a relationship. We can't develop our relationship with people in quite the same way, that maybe there's some sentimentality developing around things that we were, I don't know, less careful with in the past. I wonder if COVID is something that's impacted that. I can see, Henriette, you're nodding, so perhaps you want to add.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Carry on.
Go.
No, carry on. No, you go first.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think over this time, people have changed also the way that they look at their furniture, and maybe consider more where things come from, and I'm hopeful that we can change this sort of throwaway culture, and that people actually pay more importance to provenance and where actual things come from and how they're made, and that way give something another lease of life. Use more antiques. They're incredibly well made. They have a story to tell. They come with an instant patina, with a sense of past, with a sense of maybe belonging in a story that then becomes yours, and somehow that gives an interior an extra sort of comfort, I think. And I think over this time, and that we've sort of been stuck at home, people have started really caring more, and whether that's where their food comes from, of course that's the same, and maybe going more local shopping, you know, all of those things. But the consideration then goes on to furniture and how things are made and what things are made out of, and what are we doing with our, you know, it's a huge subject, but what are we doing with our byproducts? What are we doing about wool? What are we, you know, I think people have just in general become much more aware and interested in that sort of side of things, and that's a really good thing. I don't know if you see that too, Tom, but it's certainly something I have noticed hugely.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was going to say actually is that we talk a lot about, or people talk about sustainability and recycling, but obviously reusing is much better than recycle. And what is reused more than anything? Something that has stood the test of time and is part of art of antiques, and certainly something that is restored. I know we've got quite an interesting project to talk to us about, just thinking about sustainability in terms of Devon. But before we move on to that, I wanted to sort of pick out some particular projects and sort of that are indicative of British craftsmanship. And I just wondered if you could talk us through, given that this year is the tercentenary of Grinling and Gibbons, so it's sort of a great craftsman. Tom, I wondered if you could just talk us through that project that you got involved with.
Yeah, no, the project I was involved in was actually several years ago, but we were involved in conserving the organ case at St Paul's, which was installed, I think, in about 1690 by Grinling and Gibbons. Grinling and Gibbons came over to the UK from Holland. He had English parents, but he came over just shortly after the Great Fire of London, and initially he started doing carvings for ships, I think, actually, and then moved on to more architectural work, and yeah, we were asked to come and look at the carvings at St Paul's that cover the organ case. There was a lot of loose elements and a lot of dust that needed removing. So it was a sort of a true conservation job. We didn't actually recarve or replicate any of his carvings, but we made sure none were loose and were going to fall off. Also, we had quite a considerable amount of carvings that had already come off that we had to find positions for, find where it had come from, which if anybody's seen the organ case, it's quite a task to actually pinpoint where any piece of carving might have come from. It's not always obvious that there's actually anything missing unless you're up close to it as well.
So it's made in limewood, isn't it?
Yes, no, that's right. Limewood was used for its, it's a very tight grained wood, but also very, very easy to carve compared to something like oak. The detail that you can achieve on it is much crisper and sharper. It undercuts very well, so you can make the carvings look very light and very fine. It's an amazing timber to use.
Fantastic that you got to work on it, and I did read something the other day that when the fire happened in Hampton Court, that it was an American who ended up restoring that, and he's written a book on it, which I was.
Yes, yeah, no, I can't think of his name now, but yeah, he's almost,
but it's something that will be coming to us. But you're not seeing anything coming to the workshops that you're having to get ready for the exhibitions this year? Because I know that there's going to be some exhibitions later. So.
Yes, no, there will be. I mean, the Grinling and Gibbons Society are obviously going to have a lot. There's lots of things going on there for the August centenary. Yes, but worth watching.
So when we were, I'm just thinking about sort of British talent and everything, and when we were kind of having a conversation before, Charlotte, you talked about porcelain and something, and I just wonder if this is something distinct about the sort of UK story in terms of,
yes,
if you like,
and how we're seen,
yeah,
in a sense.
just a little bit to that, then we can explore it maybe from relevant.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's very difficult for us to sort of see ourselves, isn't it? And in a way, it's one of our writers, Willa Latham, who has a fantastic website called The Gentle Rattle of China, and she specializes in British porcelain. And she's Dutch, half American. And you would think that her interest might be in Delft ware and Dutch ceramics, but actually she's obsessed with British porcelain. When she moved to the UK, she became completely fascinated by it. And she said the thing that excites her so much about it, or she sort of understood the excitement of it in terms of it's an industry that was never owned by royalty. It was never owned by government. It was always in the hands of private individuals, entrepreneurs, people who were hugely competitive and hugely creative. And that sort of intense competition then gave birth to this extraordinary variety of porcelain that has kind of continued in a way that I think is unrivaled in terms of its range and variety. And people are very, very excited about it all over the world. And she has customers sort of globally who she sells her porcelain to. And that really kind of gave me pause, because I think we're often quite outward looking, which perhaps is the source of our creativity, in that we are a bit of a melting pot. Our language reflects that. You know, we borrow words from other countries, we absorb all of this stuff, but kind of repurpose it in a slightly unexpected way. And I think that's yes, I think that's really sort of rather wonderful. And we also have great art schools as well that support all of this. So yes, that's yes, it's interesting to see how we're seen. And I know Henriette experiences this with American clients as well, who see that there's a real sort of cachet with British made products, and whether they're antiques or contemporary crafts. So yeah, oh, Henriette's disappeared, I think.
Oh, I think I'm back, sorry.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for seamlessly leading us to Henriette, Charlotte. Your American project, but also I'd quite like to explore a bit about your Devon project as well. So yeah, start with the kind of outward facing. So
okay. Just I think in terms of the so we've got a couple of American projects, and I think this comes about because of exactly what Charlotte was saying. I think we've got such a plethora, I mean, so many amazing artisans and suppliers and furniture makers and, you know, stonemasons and you know, fabric wool producers. You know, we make for, as she says, for so many other countries. You know, for example, there's a company called Johnsons of Elgin up in Scotland who make the most wonderful woolen and cashmere fabrics to deliver all over the world, really. And they, you know, they're producing for MS, for example, which, you know, nobody would know, but that is the case. And I think that's the case for so many other companies as well in the UK that quietly, you know, export. And so with our American clients, they really value all those things. And so we're loading up containers full of beautiful antiques. And for example, sort of specialist upholstery things, you know, Howard sofas, armchairs. There's another company called Ensemblier, which make really beautiful handmade traditional upholstery methods, horsehair and so on, still all the old ways. And there's lots of those. So I think the Americans really value that, as well as just the British look. So I think they really care about that. So for example, in that container goes a few pieces from Soane, Britain, which probably everyone knows, you know, some brass étagères and things like that. Exquisite craftsmanship. which also they can't get. So that's what they really want. So that's the sort of beginnings of American jobs, which will take a long time, because it takes quite a while to fill up a big container of really interesting things. But so then going on to our Devon project, this was a particularly interesting project, because the brief was really to completely restore this beautiful, beautiful old Regency house. Pretty much, it needed pretty much everything doing, and so that meant that the client didn't want anything in the house that wasn't original or antique or of the same period or had provenance, or so it was a real sort of jigsaw puzzle of where to get the right thing. So as an example, we needed some floorboards where some were rotten and things, so they wouldn't just go and let us get some something similar. It had to actually come from from Devon, so it had to come from the neighboring areas. So we've then in the end found, with the help of this amazing builder, we found some old floorboards of an old nunnery not far away, that got reclaimed, and the nunnery was of the same age. So really that was kind of to the extreme, but that then also moved on to every element in that house was antique. So from the bathtubs to the vanity, the stone vanity units, to we even had an antique loo, a blue and white china loo that Water Monopoly sourced, which was called the Gladiator, and it took us at least half a year to source original old flagstones for parts in the hall that needed patching up, that had been cut out for various things. So it was just a particularly interesting project in that respect. So for example, that 4-poster bed that you're seeing is an antique one and of the period, and something that you would have found. So and the fireplaces, it had kind of new fireplaces in from the previous owners. So what we did was find what would have been there and find the actual antique pieces and put it all back as to how it would have been. Underneath this huge rug, you can probably hardly see, but are the floorboards from the nunnery. So that sort of thing, but that level of of research and detail and thing, I see much more on projects these days. People are much keener to actually find original pieces. Even for kitchens, they love this sort of story that comes with it. So in the kitchen in that project, for example, all the fittings were that I get to the wallpaper in 1 second. There's all the fittings are antique and old. So there's some swan neck, some swan taps with an actual face of a swan, sink taps, which took forever to find, but are just so special. And that gives that house a real character and a real feeling and a story to tell, and just add something interesting everywhere. And kind of to wrap it all up together, you have to find that missing piece, which is not possible, for example, to be antique. So that wallpaper, which kind of melts it all together or webs it all together and makes it work, is from an amazing British designer called Martha Armitage, who I believe is a sort of third cousin of the Queen. Anyway, she's an amazing artist, and she block prints those very, very special wallpapers, which you can customize the color, everything. And because they're hand printed, block printed, they have that real antique feel to them where nothing is quite, you know, lined up, and so it just looks like it's sort of meant to be there, and as it's sort of evolved over time, and that is really what we're trying to achieve, and what we're all about. That's comfortable kind of interior that looks like it's sort of slightly evolved over time, and with different, you know, inputs maybe, and sources, and sort of collected pieces, rather than something that has just happened in a quick flurry. Although even if maybe it has, but you know, it doesn't want to look like that. And I think that is what people are after much more these days, and especially the Americans now really, you know, love to create that look. So
I mean, I'd love to have a proper look and step inside, but I mean, it looks, you know, incredibly smart and wonderful, but also actually just very warm and comfortable. It looks like a home that you would want to be in. But I'm just thinking in terms of sort of that's you know, reclamation in action, if you like. And Tom, when you're sourcing things for a project and you're doing restoration, where are you having to sort of reclaim pieces to be able to fit with the restoration you're doing? How do you source?
I mean, it is very important to use timbers of the same quality and age, and we tend to be sort of, you know, putting a small patch on a piece of furniture, which, you know, to try and match grain on wood it can be quite complicated and difficult to actually get just the right piece. But obviously the better the match, the better the job. So that is a big part of our work, really, to be able to. We have quite a large stock of what we would describe as breakers, which are pieces of furniture that perhaps weren't worth restoring, or gone beyond the point of being restored, which we're able to source, well, spare parts from, if you like, you know, so we can use an original drawer bottom if we need to replace a drawer bottom in a chest of drawers. We have the right thin material. If it's, you know, might be a nice piece of quarter sawn oak, which already has the amazing color of a piece of 18th century oak on it, so we're not having to apply additional colors or stains. And also we'd also use pieces of wood that also have a finish on it and already have the patination of age on it, so we're not actually having to replicate 300 years of patination. We're actually using a piece of timber that's of that age almost, that has the patination of age already on it. So yeah, that's you know, the best piece of conservation or restoration of a piece of furniture is finding the right piece of timber to patch or repair it with, because yes, you can apply color, you can apply finish to blend the repair in, but it's always better if you don't have to mess with it too much.
Who's the holy grail to work on? What's just so beautifully made that it's just a total joy? Are there kind of designers, makers, or craftsmen stand out that?
Well, I think perhaps for me it's maybe more of a period that I like working on, and also from the sort of point of view of satisfaction as well. It's nice to have something that comes in that looks a real mess, and then you actually really pull it all together and it looks amazing. You know, I'd sooner be working on something that is a real mess, that you can have the satisfaction of it actually looking amazing after you finished it. But for me, you know, sort of 18th century mahogany pieces or the walnut period is just that's what I like, but also I really like sort of very regionally made pieces, you know, that have an amazing patina on them.
It's that draws everything together, isn't it? So whether it's the wallpaper that brought the kitchen together, whether it's the patina on a piece of furniture, it's those textures and colours and warmth that draws it together. But thinking about the sort of back to that controlling your environment and the impact of COVID, people obviously use homes and antiques as a fantastic an educational tool, but also a fantastic reference and sourcing tool. Have you seen particular trends sort of over the last few months, or that you're sort of looking at, in fact, whatever you're writing on now, your projection next few months, where things are going?
Well, I think actually that it seems that we were sort of worried at first because there was this awful lull where suddenly all of the things that we had planned for the magazine slightly fell by the wayside because we couldn't shoot things. There were all sorts of problems. But actually our readers' appetite for learning about antiques, reading about antiques, but also much more reading about seeing antiques integrated within interiors. It is very much homes and antiques. It's, we don't live in museums. I think the interesting thing about Henriette's design for their house in Devon is that it's that layering. You have some contemporary pieces in there, but they're sympathetic, and so you have this sense of an interior that, as she said, has sort of evolved over time. And I think those are the interiors that people are increasingly interested in. It's not those kind of starry, aspirational interiors. It's ones that really feel like they are a personal expression of the owner, and that it's been thoughtfully put together, sometimes with exceptional and really museum quality pieces, but other times it's things that they've just acquired over time. They've fallen in love with a thing, it appeals to them for whatever reason, and slowly they've built a room around these pieces. And it comes back to that idea of the stories within them. I think anybody who's interested in antiques is fundamentally, it's about the stories they hold, isn't it? And it will either be the story of the piece, because how it's made, what it represents historically, or it might be that it belonged to a particular person of note. And so somehow you're able to connect with that person through that piece. They read this book, they sat at this table, or it's perhaps your family. And I think in this experience of COVID, some of those little pieces that we might have that are really of not very great financial value, but they have huge sentimental value, which has really grown, in that this is the closest I'm going to get to my mother, my sister, my aunt, whoever. And so there's a kind of renewed appreciation for those things, and that these are things you do need to take care of, and actually they're preferable to the brand new teapot that you might buy wherever. This one that's a bit chipped, but it does work and I love it. So I sort of feel like there's a real appetite for that actually at all levels, which is really lovely, because it means that then the stories we're pursuing are much more about makers and the people behind all of these things, which I think is, yes, there's that moment, isn't there, on the Antiques Roadshow where it's like, but what's it worth? But equally, a lot of the people are there because genuinely they sort of say at the end, oh, thank you so much for letting me share this with the viewers. And I do think that is a genuine desire that people have to sort of connect through these things. And I think actually that sort of touches on what's exciting for craftsmen and women of today, is that there's an equivalence there as well, that when you commission a piece from a maker, there's another story that begins there, that you talk to them about their work, they talk to you about what you want from them. They might have an interesting history as well about how they came to be doing what they're doing. There's a really interesting chair maker, Jason Mossery, who was originally a tattoo artist, and he did a one-day course making Windsor chairs, and that changed the course of his life. And he now makes these really beautiful chairs that are absolutely in the spirit of that tradition, but they're contemporary, but in a really subtle and exciting way. And somebody will buy that piece, and so that cycle of the story begins again, which I think is really nice. And that's something we're covering quite a lot with. We have a strand in the magazine which is about heirlooms of the future, which is essentially that idea of who's the, not quite the Chippendale of today, but you know, the piece that you might buy now that your grandchildren will be very grateful to you for having invested and taken the time and engaged with a craftsperson?
I think actually just thinking about that sort of commission as well, and that relationship and the dialogue that you have with someone who's a maker is an amazing thing. And that is something that I've really noticed with the sort of with social media just growing and growing, that actually you can reach out to some very small independent makers who are, it's, you know, quite often unbelievably good value, who are developing their career, that you can develop through even Instagram and direct messaging, a relationship where you can build something to commission. But I'm going to take that as one of your nominees, Charlotte. So that's your,
okay, yes,
future. And then I'm just going to ask each of you maybe for a sort of an icon of sort of British design or craftsmanship from yesteryears and from today. So I'm going to start with you, Tom, who's the sort of the British star, if you like, in terms of designing and making.
Well, I suppose definitely from the past, it would have to be Thomas Chippendale for making furniture. That's perhaps quite an easy one to say, but he's by far the most famous, and very rightly so as well. Very
influential because of the book, and I mean it was sort of a whole marketing exercise
exactly
as well.
Yeah, his directory, yes, was copied by lots after as well, but he certainly set the groundwork there to.
And is that the proportion, the design, is it because he brought something different to what was going on at the time? What is it that, I mean, you know, of course there's a directory, but what was it that set him apart at the very beginning?
Well, I think it was the design as well, and the quality and the materials he was sourcing at the time were just phenomenal. You know, the quality of the mahoganies he was using were just amazing. I mean, he had
no bits of his language in the breakout room or the break room.
Sorry?
Bits of languishing in your breakages room.
Unfortunately, I don't think we have any Chippendale pieces in there.
I
think no, we wouldn't certainly be breaking one of those anyway if we did. But
are there craftsmen sort of working now that you think are going to really build a legacy, or?
I mean, I'm sure there are. I think perhaps, yeah. I mean, like I said, it's been heavily copied, his style, and perhaps in some places it has been copied very well. I think where you can always spot the copies is quite often with the quality of the materials that are available to use as well. That can certainly be how you can tell from the real thing to the recently made.
Luckily, we've got people like you and also lots of experts vetting that for us as well.
Yes, no, I'm not suggesting people have made them as fakes, but we'll just.
So, just Henriette, I know you work with so many different craftsmen, and one thing that I think is quite interesting, and most people I think watching today actually are from our sort of our fair database, but I know some members will watch this and watch it when it goes onto the YouTube and shared with members as well. But how do you source your antiques? What can our members do to attract you for your next Devon project?
You keep breaking up, but I think I got what you asked. How do I source my antiques?
Yes,
so I mean, not just to say, I mean, not everything has to be antiques. As you pointed out, you know, it's really exciting to commission something from new craftsmen, because it then makes it truly uniquely yours. So and it starts telling your story, which is super exciting. So whilst I love antiques, and I couldn't ever imagine a room without antiques, or even, God forbid, living in one, that doesn't exist for me. But I think there is, it needs to be a balance, I think, of antiques and new things, because somehow otherwise, I think they help each other. So if that balance is reached. But so in terms of sourcing antiques, there is so many different ways these days. There's so many channels that help with that. So there's kind of the collective websites, Decorative Collective and the saleroom.com and so on and so forth, millions of them, where you can, they make it very easy. You just put what you're looking for in a search bar at the top, and suddenly, the whole of Europe's all suppliers are at your doorstep. And then there are things like First Dibs, which even include, the rest of the world. So nothing is not achievable or reachable or findable, I guess. And so that's quite interesting, and that's more of a recent thing. Previously, you'd had to look quite far and wide to find the special piece. Now that has been made much easier. Also, there's a lot of really great auction houses, local or slightly bigger, not just your big ones, that have actually got really superb stock. And again, to go back to antique pieces, not every piece needs to be museum quality. Every piece has got something that's desirable about it, and and every person has or is looking for a different maybe look, feel, color, warmth, and that's what's so exciting about antiques, because there's so many different styles and types, and so you can find your own preference. But you can also, there's also lots of little antique shops still. If you go to London, I mean, millions of little areas where whether that's the Lots Road or whether that's Pimlico Green, where everybody is now, you go and you've got one after the other that's better than the next, and they're all slightly different or specialize in different things, but it's certainly somewhere where you can go and spend a day and find whatever you're looking for. So yeah, that's
and
there's so many options.
I'm going to give a little shout out to our LAPADA marketplace website as well. But absolutely,
yes, absolutely.
I think that still, places like Kenchurch Street, Broadway, Harrogate, there are still kind of groupings that are natural homes to go to. Yeah. In Kent, the Cotswolds, all sorts of places. But so you've talked about some crafts people. I know that you're particularly a fan of Lulu Light, I think. But are there, so in terms of sort of stars of the past and the future, give me 2 names that you think are particularly.
So yes, I do love Lulu Little, who I was going to talk about her rattan book a little bit, because we touched on it earlier, because it's such an interesting, and sort of niche market material. So, and she has got a really a fantastic eye for, taking things from the past and making them, approachable and relevant for today's market and what people like to have in their houses today, whether that's rattan or she's got specialist metal workers or fabrics that are all printed in the UK. She's certainly someone that I hugely admire for that, and her incredible creativity. Someone else that I think has got that balance just perfectly spot on in terms of antiques and comfortable feeling interiors is Robert Keim, obviously one of the greats. And when you look at his book that he's written, I mean, the amount of incredible homes, I don't know if it's an insult to call them homes, but they are homes because they're so livable. They're obviously hugely important houses, but to be able to create that comfort in a stately home, you know, where everything is scaled up and quite impressive, is something that I think not many people can achieve. So I'm one of the best. And then in terms of looking backwards, I mean, there's so many, but I guess if we're looking, you know, Britain would probably have to be David Hicks. You know, he put English interiors onto the scene, I think, pretty much. So, but also at the same time, he was, you know, a pioneer in so many things. And he sort of, you know, whether that was in carpets or in furniture design or in color, in fabrics, I mean, he was like all encompassing, you know, in every single element of interior design. I think that, you know, I have to choose him because there's no one really quite like him out there. And so he was sort of the pioneer for this great British interior design kind of industry that we have, that everybody kind of really looks at, I think.
Yeah, I've heard that from quite a few people at Interboard as well. Absolutely, he set the tone. And Charlotte, what about you? Coming last but not least,
from the past. Yes,
you can have another one because you have.
Well, actually, I've got two Eleanors, in fact.
Oh,
because
okay.
An Eleanor Code, because I just sort of thought she's so extraordinary, and I'm sort of fascinated by her story, about which I don't really know that much, but I just, you know, I think it was her parents went bankrupt, so she ended up moving to London, and then she bought a failing factory. She improved the recipe for artificial stone, saw off all the competition, and I think she produced things for George III, Brighton Pavilion, all sorts of really important houses of the time would have garden statuary made of Code stone, architectural details. I mean, and they survive today, and many of them in pretty pristine condition. And she guarded that recipe, and I think it's only in recent years been rediscovered, hasn't it? And Code Limited has been reformed. But I just feel she sort of embodies, although there's a question mark about how much she designed the actual things. I mean, she's described variously as a sculptor, but I think she had a lot of really brilliant sculptors working for her. So she sort of supported all of these people. I think she kind of embodies that entrepreneurial spirit and daring, and that a lot of craftspeople need today in the current climate. You know, she sort of withstood quite a lot of troubles. And I only recently learned that the factory actually sits underneath the Royal Festival Hall, which feels rather fitting. Wow. That this kind of amazing thing that is a concrete building, that one of the earliest, I think it was one of the first post-war buildings to get a grade to be listed, and underneath it is was Eleanor Code's factory. So I think she's a fascinating person. I'd like to know more about her. And the other Eleanor is a woman called Eleanor Lakeland, who we recently profiled. And she began her career as a furniture maker, but was increasingly frustrated by the fact that she was always carving off the bits of the wood that she found most interesting, the kind of burrs and the lumps, and so she then got into wood turning and sculpting, and she makes these extraordinary vessels from wood, and they look like they're made of porcelain, and they are beautiful, beautiful sculptural objects. And she has been commissioned, her public commissions always are about place. And so recently, I think during lockdown, she was commissioned by Reading Jail or Reading Museums to produce a piece about Reading Jail. It was sort of interesting. She was having to produce it in lockdown, basically jailed herself. And it's to commemorate Oscar Wilde, the jail's most famous resident. And it's called, I think it's called A Beautiful World, which apparently is what he said on the day that he stepped out of the jail. And it's two beautiful urns, I suppose, made from the wood from an avenue of horse chestnuts that grew outside the jail, and they were diseased and they needed to be chopped down. But Oscar Wilde would have seen those trees on entering the jail, seen them on
amazing.
And she has made these beautiful, beautiful urns. And I just think there's something, she sort of embodies, actually, I suppose, that idea of story, of place, of connectedness that we've been talking about. And her objects are the kind of beautiful decorative pieces that, do they have a purpose? I don't know. They just love
I think we've just put, for anyone who's watching, I think in the chat, we've just put a link to it, and I'm going to have a look. That's absolutely wonderful. You. I'm just going to see if there's any questions. Gillian, do we have any questions before we close for today? Shall I have a bit on my phone?
We have one that says, what do you see the role of sustainability, or how do you see the role of sustainability in this renewed interest in British or local craftsmanship and design?
I think we might start with Henriette for that, and then we can move quickly before we.
Okay, I think sort of sustainability is hugely important, obviously, but I think what's most important is that we all have to kind of change our ways a little bit and our outlook, and think about how we use things and why we use them. Because, for example, wool is something that we could use much more, and it is a side product which is there, and we should think about that, and this is just an example, but we should think about it for insulation. We should use more wool cupboards. We should use it in many different ways, and that kind of then goes back to sustainability, but also to choice. And it is a choice that we have to make before that can actually then move on. So it's back to us, I think, where we really have to be more conscious of what we use, how we use it, and why, as a consumer, to really make some progress there. But I think it is one of the most important things that we really have to address, like, now. So yeah, very important.
Thank you. And presumably for Tom, I mean, sustainability is at the core of everything you do, because you're restoring and reusing. But do you have to be quite careful about some of the materials you're using in terms of maybe the glues and then how you actually move things around, or do you have those conversations in?
Well, I mean, most of the adhesives we use are natural products as well. So I'm pretty all pretty sustainable, really. And I guess that the fact that we're reusing a lot of timber sourced from existing pieces of furniture that we use as breakers is also a very good way of reusing materials. So I guess obviously the shipping of pieces and moving them around is one thing, but that's inevitable. It has to come to our workshop quite often to be repaired. So that's one.
Just very quickly before Tom, we've had another one asking about having antique pieces and that are sentimental rather than financial value. How do I balance the restoration costs when the value is limited?
Well, that is always very difficult, because to reglue a chair, if it's worth £5,000 or £50, the hours that it takes is quite often the same, and that's where it becomes very difficult. And we're also quite often dealing with something it's an object that's being used, i.e. sat on, or the drawers need to be able to be opened, because furniture does tend to be used and not just something that sits on the mantelpiece that you don't have to worry about too much or touch regularly. It's a very difficult one to give somebody a better price just because it's not worth much. And there's not,
up to them.
there are shortcuts that can be taken, but it's not always the best way to restore something, and not necessarily something we'd want to do either. And that's,
sorry, apologies, Tom. I can see the time is marching on. We're about to finish. Just interested from Charlotte before I sort of close and say thank you. Are you seeing, because obviously Henriette can both choose through her own company and through her clients to sort of help educate and make people make the right choices, but within the sort of the magazine and the letters and the things that come on, are you seeing a general kind of conscientious and a movement towards wanting to be more sustainable? And I guess I'm thinking also of a younger audience who maybe enjoy antiques from two reasons. One is the sustainability element story, and the other is actually moving away from that sort of cookie cutter approach that is the sort of IKEA and the things that they would have quite exposed to recently.
Absolutely. No, people really are, I think, very, when the houses that we write about, people always talk about their antiques very much in terms of that they would always invariably prefer to buy an older thing. It's part of that sort of second-hand culture. They're happy to do that. It isn't an issue, and I think it's there for them as a kind of conscious thing. Perhaps when they're ordering certain things, if they're working with craftspeople, it's nice to support local people. That air miles thing that used to be a thing you'd collect, and now you really want them to be, it's a thing you want to avoid. So there's definitely that. People do talk to us about that. But I think if you are interested in antiques and that's what you're buying, in a way, it's sort of secondary perhaps, because you're already doing that thing, if that makes sense. I'm not putting it terribly well, but
I think you're absolutely right, and it's something that I think the antiques world has been slow to own, that actually we've always been sustainable. But actually, I like Henriette's point about the wool and things like that. I mean, fantastic packing materials. It also works when you're having, your able and cold delivery, and it's a way of insulating. But actually, there are a whole load of ways that we can make and movement of art and antique.
I was going to say, wool is quite an interesting thing, because there's a company called Natural Mat who make mattresses and bedding.
Yeah, they're great.
And they make these wool duvets, and I am going to get myself a wool duvet. Hadn't sort of come across the idea before, but it sounds wonderful, and it's from a flock of sheep that they know, and I kind of really love that idea of it being this local thing.
They do their mattresses are also fully
organic,
that's why they called it natural. It's quiet and and breathable and and sustainable, and absolutely. So really, really important. But I do think there's a great trend towards this in every sector. I think people, and actually I notice it in my children, they're much more aware. Even though they're only 10 and 13, they want to know where things come from. They don't want to, they are very much on that save our planet drive. So they're super conscious, and I think there's a whole generation coming up that really want to look after the environment. Absolutely. And so
thank goodness we've got behind us saving the day. Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you for your time today, Henriette and Charlotte.
Thank you.
So to Cultural Commons for helping us put this together, and for Gillian powering it away in the background. And sorry if there was any glitches, I was having some IT problems, but thank you. And we will see you anon in a month's time doing another LAPADA Leaders. All right, goodbye everybody. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.